Hello, Steve here, at West Green. Welcome to part 6 of building the Connoisseur J15 060 tender locomotive. So far I've built the tender. If you looked at parts 1 and 5, I'll just show you what I've done. Having built the tender in parts 1 to 5, what I've done now, I spent 3 or 4 hours cleaning it all up, scraping stuff off everywhere. Then I gave it a good clean. First of all I used some washing up liquid, but I put baking soda in it. Baking soda. Baking powder, I think it's called, which is a alkaline product. I wanted to get the grease off, which is why I used some washing up liquid. But the other thing is, with the baking powder, it's alkaline, which means it neutralises the flux from the acidic flux. After I'd done that, I gave it a clean up with this stuff here. This is called Pitambari powder. It's an Indian cleaning product. It's a pink powder. Get it from Indian grocers. Anyway, so it's very good. So I've cleaned it all up, and basically once I've got it, I've got to put some more primer on and go over it a bit. But once I've done that, and I'm not touching it anymore until I finish the loco, and it'll be finally painted together. I just wanted to protect it from tarnish. Okay, now with this kit, which is an excellent kit, I highly recommend Connoisseur kits, as indeed most O-gauge modelers would. If you're a beginner, they're super kits. They're very, very easy. Anyway, Jim suggests building the basic chassis first, then stopping that, and then building the basic the footplate, cab, and a few things, just to make sure that all marries up. There's no clearance issues. I was going to do that. However, I've got a dilemma with motors. I've got a couple of motor options. I've got this Canon 1833, which has got a fold-up gearbox, which is the one Jim supplies that got a fold-up gearbox. I don't particularly like those because I just don't like fold-up gearboxes. I've also got a motor gearbox with a skew gears, which is fairly big and it may or may not fit. So I've decided to build the body first. That way I can build the chassis and get all the spacers in, trying the motor to see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, then I'll have a rethink. The other thing is that what I want to do is these are built rigid. In other words, there's 3 bearings on each side, soldered solid into the frames. What Jim does, if you run a straight edge along, like a ruler along one side, the centre axle is ever so slightly higher than the outside. The reason being, if you've got some unlevel track and you've got a bump, it doesn't sort of teeter and seesaw in the middle. So what I want to do, I wanted to compensate the front 2 wheels, but I can't put the motor on the back because of the way the spaces are. So I've got to put the motor in the middle. I can't put horn guides in the front or rear, but I might be able to put one in the middle, which at least I can set it up high and the springs will still push down and give contact with the rail all the time. Anyway, this will be all explained later in videos as I go through it. Okay, here's the basic footplate. It's got a fold up splasher in the middle. The drag beam folds up. There are 2 etched lines, half etched lines, and there's nickel silver valences will fit right in there. And then I've got the buffer beam. So that's my basic footplate, which I've just pulled out of the box today. I've just pulled it out. I haven't even cleaned the nibs off yet, where it was joined to the fret. So I'll clean that all up and solder this and get these all fixed up. Anyway, I'll be back for part 6. Well, so far I've soldered up the very basic footplate, which means folding up here. That's the drag beam, the cab end. Soldering on 2 valences. They're nickel silver. They fit in grooves. Soldering on the front buffer beam. 2 8BA captive nuts, which is to attach the body to the chassis. So I've done all that, and I've cleaned it all up, given it a really good clean, scraped off excess solder, soaked it in baking soda or baking powder, which is an alkaline, to get rid of the flux. I've done that. The other thing I've done is started the cab front. I've soldered on this piece here. It's an overlay, which the prototype had on. Originally the roof was lower, but then they raised the roof, so I suppose they patched in a piece. I don't know how they did it, but they did. I put on the outside spectacle plates. There's inside ones as well, which I've got there. The other thing is, and this is a pretty good idea, Jim actually told you how to do this, is to use a blister pack plastic, and you see how I've cut one out. But there, what I've done is within the internal one, which is there, before you cut it out, is to lay it over the top, and using a pin vise and a sewing needle is to scribe round and then cut it out. He also says, very wise, cut 4. This is because you're bound to lose 1. So I've put 1 in there. I'm going to do another 3 now. Okay, I've now got the basic footplate fitted together. The cab front, I've pressed out some rivets, which actually weren't, well, there was a couple of impressions there to put rivets in, but when I checked the real loco, there was rivets further down, so I've added those. The kit doesn't say to do it, but I did. I've pulled off the cab sides and the beading off the fret. So this is one I've done. Basically, there's a strengthening piece at the top, because obviously that's pretty thin. So that just folds over, and I've soldered it. But I've put the beading on. You can see the beading, and it's got the handrail. Here's the other. I haven't done the other cab side yet. There's a side with beading. With a strengthening piece. Here's the beading. It's got a half-etch line. Oh, sorry, I'm too close. You can see it's got a half etch, and that sits on there. So what I'll do is I'll get it right there with the handrail, and I'll start bending it and tacking it around in a few places, make sure it's right, and then I will solder it solid. Okay, it's tack soldered. What we're going to do is now flux it, put some solder in, get it all to flow, clean it up. Oh, and trim off the excess. I've now just tack soldered the front. Haven't tack soldered the sides, anything yet. That's the next thing to do, tack it all up, make sure it's all square, then solder it up solid. I think I'll call this a day. I've put the cab on. I've still got to run a fillet of solder in the outside because there's a gap. You can see the little hole for the tab, so I've got to fill that. But that's better. It's pretty square. I've got to put a handrail from there. There's a little hole in the beading, and you can see that. Hang on. Oh, check out my legs. Oh, no, don't do that. You can see the hole. So there's a handrail. I think it's a 0.7 mil, and that just goes parallel with the cab front, and you just tack solder it down there. Heck, I'm going to do it now. Now I've told you about it. There you go, done it. Saturday night here. It's the, what day is it? It's the 4th. Now, daylight saving ends here. That's because we're in the southern hemisphere in Australia. So, yeah, it ends. So I get an extra hour's sleep. Isn't that brilliant? Lovely, isn't it? Anyway, I've had enough. I'm going out to watch Escape for the Country. To the Country.